Broadcasting live from Jerusalem, this is Voice of Israel, Israel's premier English language broadcast network. Voice of Israel, bringing Israel closer.
Shalom, everybody, and welcome to the Yishai Fleischer Show here on Voice of Israel, broadcasting live from Jerusalem to the world, and you're a part of it wherever you are. Right now, in studio across from me is a hero, a decorated soldier who served for 12 years in the U.S. military, but also lost his legs in Afghanistan because he was in bomb demolition. And trying to save his buddies, he ended up losing his legs. That did not stop Staff Sergeant Brian Mast from continuing the battle to make life as rich as possible. He is married. He's got 2 kids and 1 on the way. He is at Harvard right now studying for an undergraduate degree in economics. And he's also in Israel because he wants to do what with his spare time? Serve in a volunteer Army IDF unit called Sar-El. This combination is incredible, and this man is right across from me here in studio. Brian, welcome to the show.
Shalom, Yishai.
Brian, you walked in here. I had seen pictures of you, and you walked in here on your prosthetic legs. You walked here. You have a cane, but as I kind of touched your arm, I saw a very fit person, and as I look in your eyes, I see an incredibly alive person. Tell me a little bit about the journey that you've been through in life.
Well, it's definitely been the journey that's been most important. I couldn't have enjoyed it more so far, and I spent about 12 years in the U.S. Army. I entered the military in the year 2000. And then sometime after that, the events of 9/11 happened in the United States, and my unit got called up, and I went away for a year with that unit. And then when I returned home, I was in our military reserves at that point, and I switched over to what they call our active duty military, and ended up spending the rest of my adult life as an active duty service member, primarily as a bomb technician.
So you were a bomb technician in Afghanistan?
That's correct. I was a bomb technician within our special operations. I retired from a place that they called Joint Special Operations Command in our U.S. Army.
You got to see these beautiful mountains of Afghanistan. I've never gotten to see them. I heard it's something amazing. The scenery there, the vistas.
It's all perspective. When you're walking up the mountains of Afghanistan with an 8-pound helmet and a couple pounds of night vision optics and 8 magazines and a 8-pound rifle and 40 pounds of body armor and however many pounds of explosives on your back, it's not as beautiful of a vista to say, man, I have to walk up that. But it is quite a beautiful place. It's one of the things that actually, in retrospect now, I meet people that have been in Afghanistan that maybe left around 1960, 1965, and they show me photos from when they were there, and the women were all dressed very, very Westernly, as though they could have been anywhere. They could have been in New York City. They had their hair done up. They looked like the beautiful women of the 1960s, nice dresses. Like I said, they could have been in any major city, but they were in Afghanistan, and they show this to me to show me how much things have changed under the tyrannical regimes that exist there and in so many other places, that it's sad, and it's sad for them as well.
So where it was in the 60s is not where it is today. Today it's a war zone, and you were there, and you're sapping, I guess. You're taking out bombs, making sure that they don't explode, or setting explosives.
There's a lot of applications for the work when you're a bomb technician. So my work was done primarily with special operations. The particular night that I was injured, it was actually a very normal night for us. We only worked under the cover of darkness. So really when most people were kind of bedding down for the night, that's when we were waking up and getting ready to go to work. And we had the location, as we did most evenings, of a very high-value target somewhere in Afghanistan there. And we were to develop a plan of attack on how to go and get this individual, basically using any kind of violence of action that we wanted to use to get that individual. And
is that a military term, violence of action?
Yeah, it's just I guess it's a nice way of saying we could get the job done however we best needed to get the job done. And so that particular night, as our helicopters were headed into the place that we determined was the best place to land to get that target, I remember there being several rocket-propelled grenades that flew past our helicopter, and there was actually a lot of direct gunfire coming in from the ground. And that meant that our enemies, that the target we were after, they knew we were coming in, even though it was pitch black and it was in the dark. They knew that we were there. They heard the rotor wash of the helicopters, and so our pilots are actually, I think our pilots are quite brave because they're not sitting there with guns in their hand, and they, even though they're being shot at directly, they put those helicopters right on the ground so that the rest of us could jump off and go to work. And as the sole bomb technician, it's my job to be the explosive expert on all things explosive. Obviously, in Afghanistan, there's a lot of what people refer to as IEDs, or improvised explosive devices. That's
why is it called improvised?
It's because it's not commercially manufactured. These aren't. This isn't like, say, the conventional world wars where there's a factory somewhere and somebody's stamping out metal plates that are going to be the bottom of a landmine and the sides of a landmine and that kind of thing. They're all made commercially. They're made with explosives that are developed by somebody that has a knowledge of chemistry in the home that, maybe boils down different fertilizers and chemical products like peroxides and other things and makes an explosive out of it. They make their own blasting caps. They make their own pressure plates or command wires to set things off, or they set them up to cell phones or other things. They improvise it into an explosive device. It's not...
Okay. So that particular night?
Well, that particular night... After we jumped off our helicopter, I was the person that they would say was on point to lead the way to our targeted compound. And eventually we got to some walls, and these walls were much too high for us to ladder over. That would have been our preferred method to get over these walls. And so we had to use a breach or an entranceway, and I told my guys to hold up there. I said that if I was the bomber living in this village, that this location, that I would put a bomb there. This is where I would place an improvised explosive device. Let me check things out. I used a lot of methods to search and look for things. I looked and felt for tripwires. Actually, in that area, I wear several bands on my wrist of fallen brothers. I have many fallen brothers, but
really,
several of these brothers, actually, just a couple missions before that, had tripped a tripwire and unfortunately expired on the battlefield. And so I looked for tripwires, and I looked for any signs of disturbed earth. I looked for wires and batteries, really anything that could have been out of place that would indicate to me there might be a device buried in the ground here, and I didn't really find or see anything. Eventually, I got down on my hands and knees. I pulled a small handheld metal detector out of my pocket. I was gently probing the earth in front of me. I still didn't really find anything. So I stood up and I there were two snipers working behind me, and they were, diligently watching everything in front of me to make sure that I could do my job looking for a bomb, and they would make sure nobody would jump out and shoot me. And I trusted them just like they trust me when I say I'm going forward, that they're not going to hit an explosive device if they walk in my steps. So I stood up and I took about 1 or 2 steps beyond the area that I had searched, and I found that device that I thought was there. And
it found you.
It found me, however you want to look at it, yeah.
And you started realizing quickly that at first you didn't even know if it was you that was hit.
That's very true. It was some people refer to it as an out-of-body experience. It was a very out-of-body experience. I remember it felt like this punch from a heavyweight boxer had struck my chin, and it happened in just a flash. It's not like the movies where you hear this click and you have time to think about it and say, oh no, what was that click? It's not like that. It was just all of a sudden there was a bright flash and an explosion. I remember tumbling through the air and ultimately landing on my back. And as I'm laying there, you can imagine something that had been buried under the earth for days or weeks or months. All that dirt blew up. It was in my eyes. It was in my nose. It was in my lungs. And I was dazed and confused from, 10 pounds of explosives going off directly underneath my feet. And but as I'm laying there, I can hear my men. They're talking. They're speaking in the headphones in our comms, and they're saying that EOD was hit. That was my call sign. And so I knew at that time, I'm EOD. That's me they're talking about. And pretty much simultaneously, I realized that I couldn't stand up. So I was wondering, well, why can't I stand up? And also at that same time, I'm lifting my left arm in the air, and I'm looking at my left arm as best I can see it with this mud and dirt and soot of explosives in my eyes. And I see that all of my fingers, they're broken, and they're pointing in directions that fingers are not intended to point in. One of them didn't hang on. I don't know, it was probably barely hanging on. And it was about that time that my men actually got to me, because they had to get to me safely. They had to make sure. Something that we say is that IEDs, they don't necessarily just come in ones. They can be in 2s or 3s or 5s or 10s. Somebody could put any number of hazards out there.
Right.
So they had to get to me safely to make sure they didn't themselves become casualties. And they got to me, and they started applying tourniquets to what was left of my 2 legs and what was left of my left arm. And that was probably the most painful thing I can remember. If you can imagine a tourniquet being wrenched around that to stop the hemorrhaging, so that you don't bleed out on the battlefield. And it was about that time they put me on a stretcher, actually something we call an Israeli stretcher. I don't know if it's, I don't know if it's literally the stretchers that you use, but that's what we call them. And,
we have a lot of stuff we call American tourniquet and American this and that.
Yeah.
So you have Israeli stretchers, okay.
There you go. So they rolled me onto this stretcher, and I remember, really surprisingly, I could really only joke with my guys a little bit. Right at that time, I was strapped down to the stretcher, with very tight straps going over my chest, going over my arms and my waist and what was left of my legs. And they're hoisting me up, over on top of their shoulders, maybe 2 or 3 men on each side of this stretcher carrying me on top of their shoulders. And I joked with them a little bit. I said, man, I really hope that I did a great job in leading and clearing the way from the helicopters to where we were right now, because I didn't want to blow up again while I was strapped down to that stretcher and unable to move. I could only kind of picture landing upside down and being stuck there. So I was joking.
What's it like to talk about this right now? I mean, I'm sure you've talked about this numerous times to numerous people, but what is it like to relive this?
I wouldn't say it's painful for me to relive. It's all something that's just a part of my life. It's part of who I am. It's been part of that journey as we kind of started out talking. But it matters what day it is. It just matters sometimes. Sometimes I can be telling the story and it really gets to me. It will break me down and bring me to tears. Sometimes it doesn't do that. In my own country, we have days like Memorial Day and Veterans Day, and we play something often on those days that's called taps. And that's something that's, you'll hear it played by a bugle when, a soldier is being laid to rest. And sometimes I can just hear that song taps being played on the background in a radio on a TV or something. And it'll break me down because it's that time that I think about.
Do you think about yourself, or are you thinking also about those men that you have their names around your wrist?
It's thinking about those guys. Yeah. Like I said, it's sometimes it just gets you and sometimes it doesn't. But I think to date, I've lost about maybe 67 very close friends in our theaters of war.
How many?
67.
67?
67 guys that I can say I knew quite well, that were quite close to me. If you want to talk about acquaintances, people that maybe I just worked with a little bit less, but, we knew each other, guys that we were in the same field. Maybe we attended classes together at some point in the States, or, went to different schools together, things like that. I'm sure the number is in the hundreds of individuals that I know that have perished in our theaters of war.
One thing about myself here is that I share a lot of. I know what you're talking about because I was also injured by a roadside bomb in Lebanon, and it almost it broke my shoulder blade and could have penetrated more and into my lungs, but it didn't. It stopped at the shoulder blade and broke it, and I was also kind of carried away. And I also know certainly not that number, but a fair number of people who have been killed in battle and for the state of Israel, for the security of the state of Israel, and their brothers, and they're also like family brothers. So that's definitely something that we share. One thing about you that I've noticed is that when you came into the studio, I knew already how you were going to come in terms of your clothing, because every single picture of you. And we're talking with Staff Sergeant Brian Mast, who is a 12-year veteran, decorated veteran of the United States Army, a military, and also lost his legs, as we just were told, in Afghanistan. But I've seen in every single picture of you is that your prosthetic legs are shown with their full glory. You do not hide them. You wear shorts. You wear things that people see what it is. And when I thought about why you do that, I thought to myself, this man, he owns it. He's not trying to hide away from that. He's kind of, I wouldn't say proud, but he accepts that, and he says, listen, you've got challenges. You got to get over. You got to keep going today. You got to keep going. You have these prosthetic legs. You got to walk on them and be proud of them. Am I right about that?
I don't think you could say something that's more true. We discussed it briefly, but what you said there is something that I say to other people that I completely believe. Whatever you are, hopefully you own it, whatever it is that you are. And so hopefully that inspires you to be things that people should be proud of. That helps you to own it. If you're something that you should be ashamed of, it's probably a little harder to own such a thing. But, I say it jokingly. I don't have shoots, or I don't have suits or tuxedos. I have shoots and I have shucks. Even my tuxedo, it has shorts with it, and even my suits, they have shorts with them. That's how they're made. Part of it is just convenience because there is hardware that I need to get to on my prosthetics that makes it much easier with having shorts on. But part of it is just exactly that. You know, this is part of who I am, and I don't mind showing it. I've found it to be certainly more of an inspiration to people than more of a hindrance across the board. And if you can find a way, which is partially why I'm here in Israel. If you can find a way to do something positive, to do something uplifting, to find some small symbol that can help or be of service to others, then I think it's our job to do that.
Just for folks at home, they might not know that you refused to sit down when you came into the studios. You wanted to stand up, and you're standing on these very beautiful prosthetic legs.
Thank
and
you.
that's actually something different today. You talked earlier about pictures from the 60s. Who you are today and the freedom and the liberty that you have to move around is something that past generations that would have faced the same kind of amputation would have not been able to do. You are fully functional.
Yisha, what you say is very true. In my own time recovering at our recovery base, which is called Walter Reed Army Medical Center in Washington, D.C., I mentioned to you I got to actually visit with your own wounded service members at a place called Beit Alochem here just yesterday. But there's many veterans from the Vietnam War, from the Korean War, from World War II that would come to our Walter Reed facility, and they would mentor us and teach us and tell us, don't worry, son. Life goes on. Me. You might be lying in that bed right now, but in a couple weeks you'll be up doing this, and in a couple months you'll be up doing that, and in a couple years you'll be out doing this. So life goes on, whether you like it or not, whether you participate in it or not. Life is going to go on, and it's up to you to determine how life goes on. And those guys. They helped to set a good bar for me, but many of those guys, their first prosthetics were actually carved out of wood. I'm wearing pretty much the most advanced set of prosthetics that you can find right now, which are actually, they have microprocessors in them. They're waterproof. I can wear them in the pool or in the ocean. I could go scuba diving with them. I could do any number of things that I want with them. And it's amazing technology that helps me to be able to get out and do some of the things like volunteering, with the IDF.
Well, so there's two things I wanted to touch on. With all of that's going on in your life, with overcoming whatever limitations that you had, you are also married. You have 2 kids, and with God's help, 1 on the way. And you are finishing your degree at Harvard, not anywhere else, but at Harvard. You've also decided to take some time off and come to Israel. What is that about?
Well, I've felt a connection to Israel, as I've discussed with many people in my short time here. I've felt a connection to Israel since I was a child. I grew up in a home and in a school and in a church and everything, that it was always touted that we have Judeo-Christian values, that Israel is our closest ally in the region, that we're, a term that I've become very familiar with since being here, that we're Achim, that we're brothers. And so it was just something that was raised, being instilled in me. Now you can fast forward in life throughout my time in the military and in my travels. I've met members of the IDF, and it was always a great experience every time that I've met some of your soldiers, and it was just an immediate bond between us. Even though we wore different uniforms, there was an immediate bond, an immediate easy discussion and conversation, just as though we could be wearing the same uniform with the same flag on our shoulders. And now you fast forward to this past summer when I was doing my studies up at Harvard. And this was when Israel was facing rocket attacks. And it was at that time that there was a lot of protests going on in the United States, which I found to be very unfortunate. Some of the people...
Anti-Israel protests.
Anti-Israel protests going on, in the Boston Commons, which is a very large park in Boston, in and around the Harvard campus. Some of these people, were Palestinians that were living in the United States. Other people were simply those that sympathized with those firing the rockets. And I found this to be, in my own heart, I just thought, this is wrong. This is, these people that are protesting Israel are on the wrong side of this issue. And I felt it for a number of reasons, but I could just look at it in a very simplistic way and say, if I'm in the United States and Canada or Mexico or Cuba start firing rockets into the United States, guys like me or guys like my brothers that are in the service would be there that day to destroy the enemy. And we would destroy that enemy to the point that they would never be able to fire rockets into the United States again, ever. And that would be the resolve that we would have for this, and our country would be proud of us for doing so. And so for people to not sympathize with Israel, and for some of this wasn't, the attitude across the breadth of the United States, of course, but this was the attitude among some and among some media. For this to be that attitude, for them to not recognize that and paint Israel as this aggressor for defending themselves, it upset me, and I said, this is wrong. This is a double standard that we would not apply to ourselves in the United States. And I decided then, as I was there in my studies, that I wanted to find a way to give my own show of support, to say, some people might think this, but this is not what I think. I do as best as I can stand. I stand with Israel, and I want to show my support for Israel in this way. And so I started looking for a way to come to Israel and show my support. And I wanted that to be a way in the military, because being a former service member, it's a group that I connect with best. I always think that I get the most honest assessment of any situation from military men and women, because I think above all, military men and women know the seriousness of any situation. They know the true life and death nature of many situations, and they don't have time to give you what you might call a BS answer or a fluffy answer. They're going to tell you the truth. And that's why I wanted to be among those service members, and also just because, like I said, there's a kinship between us.
And you visited the victims of the injured soldiers, people who have either been victims of terror or soldiers that have been hurt in service, people who you commiserate with and understand your plight as well.
That's right. I was, as I said, the location was, I think 5 of these hospitals across Israel. They're called Beit HaLochem, and
that means the Beit HaLochem means the house of the warrior.
Yes, that's what I was told. No, they're partially funded by your government, but largely funded by independent donors across your country that fund these rehabilitation centers for your service members. And these rehabilitation centers are open for service members from every single war that Israel has fought, anybody that's ever served in the IDF. So when I was there, I met members from every conflict that Israel has been a part of, men that were 80 years old and guys that were 18 years old. And so it was quite the experience to be there and to share experiences, share how we were injured, how I was injured, how they were injured, what it's like for us to lose brothers, how we cope with that, how we cope with our injuries now going forward. It was so couldn't have been made more obvious how similar we are.
Brian Mast, the Israeli media has picked up on your story as well, and they have dubbed you Captain America. Because for them, that's really the American spirit, a person who, and I think that's a good analysis of what kind of the core issue of America is, which is like overcoming all odds, getting back up again, coming from nothing and starting up again and succeeding. And your love for Israel is incredibly inspiring to us. Your story by itself is inspiring, just a person able to overcome and to succeed, but then to also take that and see Israel for what it is, which is a country that's trying to defend itself, a country that's a lot like you, injured, things like the Holocaust, and getting back up again and trying to succeed. I think there's a kinship there as well.
Well, I think it's important that people realize we face the same enemies. And I think this is something that really people have realized in the past couple weeks and couple months. You more recently fought Operation Protective Edge. The United States has been at war since 2001 against these same enemies, the same ideologies of hatred. And then now most recently in France, before this in Australia. The world, unfortunately, it takes events like these sometimes for the world to come together and say we do need to finally put our foot down, that such a hatred and existence of such hatred cannot be allowed. This is not the way that the world should go forward functioning. I had a very interesting conversation with my friend Joel, who took me here to the studio, about the mothers of IDF soldiers and how much these soldiers, or how much these mothers are so sure that they need to be at home every Friday night when their sons and their daughters get home, because they're so worried about their kids during this mandatory period of service. And that speaks to the fact that, you know, Israel is not a country of warmongers. You do not desire to be at war. You desire to be at peace. You don't want your sons and daughters to have this mandatory service so that you can defend your own right to exist here. You would much rather live peacefully with your neighbors. And I believe that about you, and that's partially, you know, why I came here to show this support here. Now, you know, as far as my own family being home, you mentioned, yeah, I do have, you know, my own 2 sons sitting at home for me, and my wonderful wife of 8 years.
And I love their names. I love their names. Maverick.
Maverick is my youngest. He's coming up on 3.
And what was the one? Magnum.
Magnum. He's coming up on 5, and we'll name our little girl Madeline. But you know, it's important, I think, that we try to teach our kids good lessons. There's nothing that I want to do more than to put a smile on my kids' face, but even more than that, to raise them properly. And part of that is being there. You know, as much as I love spending my time here in Israel and helping, I would be lying if I was saying I wouldn't rather be, you know, giving my kids a bath. I love my kids. Of course, I'd rather be there with them doing that. But I think part of raising them, too, is the importance of raising them to show them what is right. And for me to be here and take of my own time and give of my own blood, sweat, and tears to come here and work with the IDF, that's me teaching my sons and my daughter to be that this is how you show support. You know, Magnum, Maverick, you don't show support by just saying something to your friends, by just writing a 100-character tweet, by just writing something on your Facebook page. You show support by getting out there yourself, by getting your own hands dirty and getting out there and doing the job yourself. And so that's why I think it's okay that I'm here, even if my daughter is born, because I think it's teaching them hopefully a more important lesson.
Staff Sergeant Brian Mast is a 12-year veteran of the United States military. He's a decorated soldier. He lost his legs. He also lost a finger in Afghanistan, but that didn't stop him. He continues to succeed in life. He's at Harvard. He's married with 2 children, 1 on the way. He's here in Israel volunteering with Sar-El, and he's an inspiration for all of us about the love of life and the love of Israel and the love of America and the love of freedom. I want to tell you that I'm honored to have you in studio, and I furthermore use my privilege as a Jew in the land of Israel to bless you, that God should keep you healthy and give you continued strength to keep walking in his path. God bless you, Brian Mast. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you, Yisha.
Hey folks, Yishai Fleischer here from Voice of Israel. We do hope that you enjoyed that content, but there's so much more, and you've got to stay connected. So click the link below and plug in.